And it's been an exciting weekend in Philadelphia. Thank you all for joining us. If you were in the city and celebrating, making time on Monday night to come learn from this awesome group. So tonight we're joined by Laura Blau. She's a principal at BLUPATH Design and also the owner of Green Steps, which is a consulting firm that focuses on energy efficiency, air quality, and comfort in single multifamily residences. Laura brings over 20 years of experience in design and construction. She's a certified passive house consultant and also a passive house builder. And she's incredibly involved within the passive house community in Philadelphia. And we're lucky to have her here tonight talking with AIA Philly Code. Scott Kelly is joining us from Revision Architecture, where he's the co-founder and principal in charge. He's also a former chair of AIA Philadelphia Code for many years and responsible for this great group coming together tonight. Scott leads Revision's interdisciplinary team in designing and consulting on hundreds of innovative green projects, many of which are firsts of their kind. And he's a champion of green building standards and verifications, including LEED, SITES, Living Building Challenge, Net Zero Energy, and Passive House. Scott's engaging collaborative approach has inspired owners, architects, and many others to incorporate green thinking into their buildings and lifestyles. And he'll be able to speak tonight on behalf of both building performance specialists and architects, given the nature of the work their firm does. And Rachel Stecker is joining us tonight as a partner at Daoust, Lestage, Lizotte, and Stecker in Montreal, Canada. Their work involves the fields of architecture, landscape, and urban design, and they bridge the limitations of traditional design and practices and dissolve boundaries between architecture, landscape architecture, graphic, interior, industrial, and furniture design. They have an incredible portfolio of work, and she's going to be talking to us about an ongoing project in collaboration with Tommaso Bitossi, who is an associate director at Transsolar and Kilma Engineering. This is an international consulting firm that's focused on climate responsive design. And Transsolar works collaboratively with clients, architects, mechanical engineers, and other consultants, really from the earliest stages of building design processes. And they consider each step from the standpoint of fundamental thermodynamics and physics. And this generates a solution in which local conditions form material and mechanical systems become integrated components of a well-orchestrated climate control system, which reduces operating costs while also increasing occupant comfort. And their work considers more than energy conservation based upon optimizing thermal properties of the building envelope and the efficiency of technical equipment. They seek a holistic design, recognizing the interdependence of factors that affect comfort and address air temperature, natural ventilation, as well as air quality, acoustics, daylight, material, and the well-being of people and the human scale. I've also had the privilege of getting to work with Tommaso and Transsolar on a project that I'm doing at Digsaw, and it's just great to have this team here to talk to us about the incredible project that they've been working on. If you're just joining us, make sure you put your name, your AIA member number, and your email address into the chat. We want to make sure that everyone gets the continuing education credit for attending this course tonight. And I'm going to turn it over to Laura Blau to kick off the presentation.
All right, so you're going to do, how do I share my screen here? Yeah. So are you letting me share a screen? I just
yeah, you should have the ability to.
Yeah, just click on the share screen button. It's going to be on the bottom of your window.
Okay.
Usually green.
You cannot start share screen until other participants are not. Okay, so here we go. All right.
Oh, and Laura, we're seeing your presenter view.
All right. Let's see if we can.
So maybe just.
I think it's display settings. You can go swap
flip, yeah.
presenter. No, go to the left. Oop. Just go back to what you were doing before.
Come on, move. I'm sorry for being a Luddite here. It's not moving where I want it to go.
Yeah, so just go to display settings on the top. Don't
So
end, just go over to display settings next to end slideshow.
that screen. All right. So let me.
There you go. Now we're
Let me
cooking.
get back to the beginning. All right. All right. I have two firms, BluePath and Green Steps. My architecture firm, BluePath, and Green Steps, which I created to try to deal with the oversight issues. So anyways, we need to collaborate as nature does. You know, the secret life of trees, you know, this forest is collaborating under the earth there. So there's a lot to be learned from nature, right? And Sam Raskin will tell you that Energy Star is not good enough. We need to do partial implementation and full measures instead of fully implementing half measures. I love that. So I've been concentrating lately on, on renovations, even though I've done new construction. What I know is growing our community of professionals is really one of the essential things that we have to do. Sharing lessons learned. We sometimes trade clients as they fall out of favor with one of us and move to the other. It's happened back and forth to me and a number of these people. In fact, with Jeremy right here. You know, as we grow this community, we have not in the past, and we're starting to get enough engineers, but I have tried to train certain people, and it can be a very frustrating process. In residential, unlike a large project where the fee is very small, you're working with an engineering firm, and you may get the boss man or woman to be on board, but they shuffle off the actual work to someone who hasn't really been told much of anything about it. And they're a 20-something who's drafting, and you get back drawings that need to be bloodied up so much with red lines because they haven't drunk the Kool-Aid, don't even know where the Kool-Aid stand is. So, so you're struggling with a low fee and that lack of actual training in order to get a small project through without losing your entire fee managing it. So that's one thing. And that is hopefully changing as we get more professionals trained, particularly in the engineering sector. Then growing our community includes stepping outside your comfort zone and joining another group of professionals that are so essential. This is the first builder training that happened in Philadelphia. I helped link them up with the Navy Yard and also called, the Halos are the guys that I called and said, you gotta come, please come take this training. And of the, 9 or 10, these are the ones that came. Dave Halsey standing next to me, Chris Hansen of Hansen Brothers Construction, Hugh Lofting of Hugh Lofting Timber Frame, and Ken Lord over here. They all came, and I knew that I had to build a group. I had to build my own team, and I couldn't execute a passive house if I didn't have contractors that were on board. I took the training, and as an architect, I really highly recommend any architect to take the builder training. You get to see and hear the issues from the other point of view. You learn a lot about sequencing, simplifying details, and the issues that the contractor side has. So I found that really useful. Right, in learning collaboration skills. I think Green Building United and the Passive House community have done demonstration projects in which we are all at tables learning collaboration by doing and exploring various options and ways and approaches. And that has been really useful, not only to build a whole spectrum of newbies to more experienced people, and across all disciplines, including the layman. So I think this is really important in terms of having people appreciate the expertise of each of the fields to understand why it's so important to engage them in your project. One of the things in residential that I found, which is both, you know, kind of wonderful and awful, which is the type of clients initially, and I think this will change over time, is this very passionate person who's read a little bit about Passive House. This is what they want, but they're internet savvy and they're awful micromanagers. So their wonderful passion is that they want you to basically give them that 80 hours worth of training for free, because they're excited and they want to know everything, and they get on that internet and they are chasing down and saying, oh, I learned about this material, shouldn't be using this. And they don't understand that your expertise is that you're going to put a system together that is compatible, that works, and you can't possibly convey to them in the amount of time given all the nuances of why you're deciding to do what. So managing that in the residential field is really one of the challenges that I've found. And then there's the perception versus reality, and why I created green steps in order to overcome this, which is when you're considering the CA in a standard architect's fee, the amount of CA you need in order to really accomplish the quality control for Passive House is greater than a standard fee in order to have that level of attention to detail, which, you know, as we all know, many of us have experienced the contractor that says yes to your face, and then they go and do things how they've been doing it for the last 10, 20 years incorrectly. So trying to overcome that is interesting. But let's just, for example, say that, you know, you've got a $50,000 fee. It's a, you know, near $750,000 project. You need an extra $5,000 to really do the oversight that you need. And that $5,000 on that making 55 looks like a big number to the client, where it's a drop in the bucket on that 750,000 bill. So I now will say to the contractor, and Chris Hansen was the first one I said, you know, next time, what if you paid me? You had a line item where it's outside of the client. The client doesn't need to know. You can call me in because you need me. And he said, that would be great because I really did need you. And I knew that you weren't getting paid. And it was a conflict between both of us trying to do what we need to do, you know, team collaborate the way at the level that we needed to. And yet the fee wasn't there for that. And he knew that he was going to lose money if I wasn't on the job helping him get through those details. So we need a diverse, trained, collaborative contractor labor team that are problem solvers and have a shared goal mentality. All right, so this is hard to find. You know, racially diverse and gender diverse is hard to find. I have found a couple of firms. Hive Mind worked on our project, and they are a co-ed collaborative team. And just the culture of that collaborative spirit is just different than your all male, all white guys, which are great sometimes with, you know, sometimes not, but it's just a different spirit. You know, when we're being challenged by trying to build this diversity, just like being anti-racist, being anti-sexist really should fall on the shoulders of the white guys, and just as anti-racism falls on the white privileged folks, to really interrupt when they see sexism happening, right? And that's hard to do, but we've got to learn how to do it. And the more we can learn how to do it, the more we're going to have positive and and successful projects that are diverse, right? There's a lot of oversight and testing that you have to educate the clients about, you have to educate your contractor team about, and trying to keep that positive spirit when, you know, this non-professional, the residential group of contractors is a little different. They are, it's kind of the wild, wild west. So, you know, there's the heroes that like to ride in and save the day. They're all well-intentioned and excited and interested. They're not always knowledgeable. Sometimes they are, and a growing number is. But you know, so you, even though they want to save the day, if they aren't mentored properly, they will still fall behind. But the good ones are excited about being mentored, are able and allow mentoring, and so I call them my pros, right? And we have the hackers. We've got the scoundrels. You know, we all know them, and the residential industry, I think, has a larger share of this, which is, you know, bottom dollar, cut the corners, you know, hide their errors, and be kind of jerks on the job. Fight, backstab, you know, all that kind of stuff. That happens quite a bit on residential projects. And then you got the newbies, all right? The newbies are, you know, well-intentioned, but they don't have a lot of knowledge, and mostly they don't recognize that they don't have a lot of knowledge. So that's a struggle, is to deal with the wild, wild west. So having to collect and analyze the facts of the job, doing the various testing that you need. Some of it we can do in-house. As we get more busy, we direct more and bring other consultants in to do some of this work. But it's really important that we understand at the residential scale that this is just as important as it is on the larger scale. And there's actually, in some ways, smaller room for error. You know, a thermal bridge, for example, in one project was a beam that was accidentally, you know, not caught on the drawings because they used an old base, and there's this thermal bridge of a beam. And my engineer said, well, you know, we had a beam like this on another project and they didn't seem to mind. It was a passive project. And I said, well, how big is that project? Well, it was a, you know, 130 unit multifamily senior housing project. And I'm like, well, order of magnitude, one beam going through that project and this, you know, 2,500 square foot project, what do you think the effect is? And he went, oh, yeah, I guess you're right. So, you know, we don't have as much margin for error. We have to pay attention and have everyone on board and not think it's not a big deal. Everything's a big deal. So, you know, you have to establish those goals with your client in order to know, you know, where you need your professionals, and using them is really important. So this is a little bit out of what we need to talk about, but there's that testing. And here in my 170-year-old 4-unit apartment building, this is the matrix of the different kind of walls we're starting with and how we're trying to manage each one of them. And some of them we can gang together because they're similar enough that we can average out and use a similar wall type. But, you know, historic renovations and building renovations of older buildings where you have might have plaster on that wall in one place and just, you know, 2-width somewhere else, 3-width another, with plaster, without plaster. I mean, some of it's wood frame. It's a whole mishmash of things that you're trying to manage. And there's a lot of building science to deal with, which is different than new construction. So you need to be smart about it, you need to be informed, and you need to think through a lot of interesting transitions between these different wall types. So there you go, that's what I have to offer.
Thanks so much, Laura. So if you have questions, drop them in the chat. We're going to do questions collectively at the end. We're going to turn it over to Scott Kelly from Revision.
Okay, sounds great. I'm going to request that, Laura, you may have to stop sharing your screen so I can pick it up.
Right, okay. I'll share.
Okay, let's see if I can get it going. Nope.
It started.
Yeah, no, I just showed the wrong screen, so bear with me for a second. I got to open it up again. And in presentation mode, and now. Oh. One more time, guys, sorry. Share screen. Screen one. Now you should see the right screen. You guys see that?
Mhm.
Okay, you just see one slide, right? Okay, unfortunately, I can't see you anymore. I wish I could. I'll lose you for a little bit. I like seeing all those smiling faces of people that I know. All right, let's see where I should start here. I think the intent of this presentation, or part of the intent of this presentation, is to have some dialogue on how we make this relationship work. So right now we are presenting a little bit from the consultant standpoint, but I hope towards the end we can get into some real dialogue on also what you need as architects for us to be successful. And we're trying to make this process of working as consultants with you super successful, easy, fun, rewarding. So let's get into it a little bit. And this is coming from the consultant's perspective. First thing I think we should do is it's always a good idea to understand the background of your presenters, mostly so you can heckle them, but honestly, so you can decide what to keep and what to throw out. So a little bit of background on me. I am an architect. I do still practice architecture. I spend about maybe 50% of my time working on the architecture firm and 50% of my time working on the high performance building design consulting side. And I've been doing that for about 20 years, and we do that all across the country. Typically, we work in a bunch of different arenas. We do a lot of high performance building consulting services, the building science side, and that's working with LEED and Live and Build and Challenge and net zero energy and net zero carbon projects. And then we deal with a lot of certifications, and that's like the certification management part. On top of that, we do a lot of project facilitation, community engagement work, writing everything from writing very sophisticated owner's project requirements to SHRED facilitation. All right, so with that said, the one thing that we try to do is we try to remove all the barriers to everybody else designing, constructing, and then maintaining their projects in a green and sustainable way. All right, so focusing on the topic, I'm going to try to hit some bullet points. I'm only going to do 4 or 5. See how we go, how it goes for time. First, and you're going to hear this again and again, and you've heard this through many of the other events and lectures. Early engagement is clearly most important. Getting that good advice up front is going to save you so much time and headache in the end. It'll save on the financial side, and it'll just increase your success. So one of the challenges here is high performance building consultants or high performance specialists, whatever you want to call us, need to be involved from the concept. And that's a bit of a challenge because not only are we not typically involved from the concept, you guys aren't either. And that's something that we all kind of have to advocate to change in the industry. Just to really demonstrate this, I'll build off the Mclean Curve, which is something that all of you ought to know. It talks about the possibility of high value changes very early on in the project. And then as that trickles off, low value changes happen and add a lot of cost to the project. To take this a step further, if you look at this graph, many of us, including me, as architect, don't always get involved in the early programming phases. And we have to really advocate that we need to be involved more in that, or we're not involved in that part of the work in our firms. In either way, we lessen our ability to have effect. And I think the point here is we all have to advocate for some change there. The biggest change, the highest value change for any high performance building design consultant is even before what's standard architecture process and practice. It's looking at the business planning, the site selection, even before that RFP comes out. And it's a big challenge to affect that, but if there's ways to involve either you, advocate you as architect, or a high performance building consultant that early on, your odds of success will go up exponentially. To illustrate this a little bit more, I'm just going to kind of show you a very fast example of an early involvement. And this is a representation of a project where essentially the client came to us and said, we are really interested in LEED certification, maybe silver, who knows? And we're really interested in our carbon footprint because we've been tasked to reduce that by 50%. We don't really understand that. So through some dialogue, they got very quickly that using the existing building and renovating it reduced their carbon footprint by, let's just say, about a quarter over a 30-year period, just in that move alone. They ended up making the right decision, and rather building a new building, something really fancy and high IT for themselves, they decided to take a step back, live up to what they've said they're going to do, and reuse an existing building. So to show you what that might look like, here's a quick example. This is very simple carbon benchmarking. It wasn't sophisticated. There wasn't a lot of fee to do it, but we came up with some benchmarks, and that let them realize that even in just using that existing building, they reduced that part, roughly 50% of their carbon footprint, by 50%, taking 25% of the carbon footprint out. As the project went forward, we looked at the existing design or the new design, renovating that existing building, found some ways to reduce that carbon by about 50%. That's pretty good. We usually don't hit that number. Then we're able to walk the design team through a process of looking at their operational carbon. We cut that at about half, 50%. Not bad. Probably could have done a little bit better for this climate, but I was happy with it because at that point, as a team, we were able to engage and figure out, well, let's put some photovoltaics on the roof. We spent enough money on the enclosure already. Now the best investment was really on photovoltaics. And surprise, this one was pretty easy for a 2-story office building. We were able to make them net zero energy, or predicted to be net zero energy. In fact, we had about a 25% surplus of energy, therefore beginning to reverse that carbon equation. So over time, over a 20-year period, they produce more energy, which offsets their embodied energy. And now we're talking about trying to get them to carbon neutrality or even carbon positive. Remember, this is a project that with early engagement, which is why I'm using it as a quick case study, we were able to go from LEED certified to carbon positive. So we're not quite there yet. We're still trying to find more ways to sequester carbon in the site and do some hand printing strategies, a little bit of cheating there, which will offset the carbon that they will have remaining. The point is, really easily up front, if we're able to have the conversations with the design team, with the owner, we're able to have a much better impact. Okay, so I'd be remiss if I didn't make one quick point, and it's really this: the time that you can involve high performance building design consultants isn't just in the beginning of the project, it's the ongoing operations and maintenance. And we have found time and time again, when we're looking at the full life cycle of high performance, there comes a point where with the Mclean Curve, the cost goes down, the impact goes up, and once again, that curve flips. Takes some time, sometimes it's 5 years out, but it does happen. And I just wanted to make that point quickly. Okay, major point 2, keeping building performance specialists well-informed, but not over-informed. We love working with you guys, but when you ask us to come to every meeting, we just become too inefficient. When you ask us to look at every submittal, it's just too much information. So the key here is to work strategically to help us figure out what we need given this specific project and the specific goals, and when it's best for us to plug in. Okay, so for an example of that If you give us a schedule and it looks something like this, too much information. We need to translate that to something as simple as this. And this is an example from a lead project of when the high performance building consultant should be involved, whether it's in the original goal setting or the visioning, which happens a little bit before this, or in the enclosure commissioning, which on a lead project must happen by the design development phase. I'm going to say that again. For you that are working on lead projects, please do not forget that that scope of work is supposed to happen in the design development phase where you break the lead prerequisite. This is something we see time and time again that design teams are forgetting until far too late. So it should be as simple as this to be well-informed and not overly informed. One of the keys in that is it really does help if the main point of contact on the design side is more familiar with sustainability strategies and process. This way we can keep everybody better informed going forward. Okay, third point. If you think about what we've all learned as architects, we would never let a mechanical engineer go talk to the owner without being in the room, or the owner's rep or the contractor. We have been taught to play this game of whisper down the lane. And that's a problem. It's a problem when you're trying to get to high performance building. Partially because to be a high performance consultant, we don't just interact with the architect or the design team. It has to go beyond that. We know that this model isn't successful. And it's quite frankly, it's got to change going forward. You have to have some faith in us that we are going to work in the best interest of all parties to educate them, share information, and then report back simply and efficiently to the relevant parties. And I'll mention this through a principle. And if you've ever heard of this principle before, I'd be incredibly surprised because I made it up 10 minutes ago. So I'm going to call it the 3-2-1 principle. Pretty simple. 3/6 of the time, we need to interact with the design team. That's design team. 1/3 of that would be mechanical. 2/6 of the time, we need to interact with the contractor directly to be an advocate to show them an easier way to do what they're trying to do, to give them the coaching necessary to be successful, not with the top-down approach, not to yell at them at what's in the specs, but to be their friend and help them through the process. And 1/6 of the time, we need to interact directly with the owner, help them set policies, set their agenda, make sure money is allocated correctly so the entire team can be successful. So what that means is, although contractually, probably half the time, for many of the people on this call, we work directly for you. Sometimes we have to really work for everybody. Even though we're being paid by you, we're paid by the owner. We really see our role as high performance building consultants to make everybody's life easier. Remember, going back to removing those barriers to everybody designing, constructing, and operating buildings in a green and sustainable way. Okay, next point is really this. We can come from all different perspectives in this area of high performance building. And some of it is human performance, some of it is toxicity, IAQ testing, enclosure commissioning, you name it. It is very, very broad. No firm has all the expertise at the level that's appropriate for every project. Some have too high, some have too low, which is why a lot of this in this profession have learned to work collaboratively with each other. There are times I'm going to reach out and call Transsolar, and we've worked with them before, and there's times I'm going to call Laura. We have to figure out what's best for that project, think like a nonprofit organization, do what's best, not what's in your scope. Or not necessarily try to grab scope that you're not the best fit for. Along the lines of this, I guess as an example, we'll be asked to do building enclosure work. We've been doing quite a lot of that, and we're in a project looking at it, and many firms don't go out and have a lead consultant, and that's totally okay. We want the industry to work that way. But if you ask us to just take a look at where you are and in a very brief period of time and without much fee, we can tell you what you've missed in the lead rating system that was really easy or appropriate that has no cost, and therefore you're not fighting for other points. The point is, most of the people who work in this field have multiple areas of expertise, fairly deep, and you should consider asking us the questions that'll keep the rest of the team from getting stuck. Okay, next point. These are just some quick closing thoughts. I guess I would say it this way, is that you can engage any high-performance building consultant, and the place to use us successfully is to add some extra green juice or credibility to your project, to push it beyond what you were able to do traditionally or typically. And this isn't just the design team. You can use us to add some extra, green juice or special sauce, or however you want to phrase it, performance or success from the client's perspective. We've all gotten really good at convincing the client to push harder, try harder, and be more successful. That's a good place to add us. You have to think of it, I think of it this way, like even in our architecture side of the company here, which many of us are on the call, they may get a chance to look at one project or two projects over 2 or 3 years. On the consulting side, over 2 or 3 years, the consulting side might get to look at 100 projects because they're focused just on that. And part of what that means is if you unpack that green juice, there are many different ingredients in the green juice, different strategies, let's call them. What those high performance building consultants can do is show you the right strategy for the right project. And if we're good, we'll ask you you'll take the ingredient without us from one project to the ones we're not working on. And so beyond the projects that we're just working with you on, the ones that are trying to get LEED or Living Building Challenge, but all your projects. And that's really where we need to be. We'll also keep you from making mistakes, like in this list of ingredients here, adding too much ginger. If you're making a green juice, you add too much ginger, it kills it, too spicy. So all good places to add in. Let me close on this. This is a very familiar quote to all of us, I hope. It's from John F. Kennedy, I think. The point here is the end goal is for us all to share lessons among firms, the firms that you see up here, and among the people on this call. For 10 years, I ran AI Code, and our one thing that we were trying to do is get everybody to share the things that they messed up and the things that they were successful about. And that one of the best ways to engage with your high performance building consultants is to share those lessons, ask us where we've messed up and we'll share, and you share what didn't work for you as well. So I think I'll stop there, and we're going to do questions at the end. One of the things I want to hear from you guys, you didn't think we were just going to take questions, we're going to ask you questions too. What do high performance building consultants need to do better for you so we can be more successful on your projects? Okay, hopefully that was pretty good and I hit a couple good points. I will stop sharing screens.
Thank you, Scott. And so in addition to dropping any questions that you have in the chat for Q&A after our next presentation, also, if you have a response to Scott's question, include that too. What can high performance building consultants do for you? It'll be an interesting conversation following the next presentation. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Rachel and Tommaso for our last portion.
Everyone, I'm just going to figure out how to share my screen. Okay.
Great.
Can everyone see that?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I think we are, Tommaso and myself will be a good follow-up to the last two presentations, since we are the building performance specialists and architects working together. So I'll let Tommaso give a little introduction, and then we can launch into a project which hopefully will end up very successful, where we truly have been collaborating from day zero, not even day one of the project.
Exactly. So Bunny already said something about us. We are consultants, and as you see in this sketch, we place ourselves, as we have been talking since now, in between architect, mechanical engineer, facade specialist, structure, and the client, of course. Everything needs to be integrated in a way to reach a certain performance, and of course, user comfort. This is what we mainly do.
And at Lestage, for the last 30 years, we've really focused on a multidisciplinary approach to architecture. So we say that our approach is based on intertwining disciplines from the city to the object. So in our office, which is only about 20 people, we have architects, urban designers, landscape architects, industrial designers, and we really practice a holistic approach to projects in general and sustainability as well. And so the project that both Tommaso and I have been working on since, I guess, the fall of 2018 was initially a competition for a project called the Marketlands, which is under development in Winnipeg, Canada, in Winnipeg, Manitoba. And really, we teamed up from the day the RFQ was released. And so from really the first kind of expression of interest on the project, we sat down with Tommaso and his team and really kind of brainstormed what could make, what are the key elements of this project, which could be interesting and could really attract them to our team. And so Transsolar had previously had some work in Winnipeg, and for those of you who I'm sure are less familiar with Winnipeg, they have extreme swings of temperature from plus 40 in the summer to minus 40 Celsius in the winter. But they also have Canada's highest rate of, or highest level of solar radiation. And for a city that's relatively small, they have a lot of very high performance buildings and high levels of sustainability. So when the competition was released, actually the RFP stage that we moved forwards towards, we teamed up with other consultants and really started diving into the project. And one of the things that we say, and one of the reasons we really like working with Transsolar, is that the importance of a mobilizing vision is really key to the success of any project. And so from early on, we worked with Tommaso and the rest of the team to really highlight what were the key elements of the site. They had existing, very kind of brutalist buildings, but that also had existing elements in the basement that we thought we could potentially reuse. They had a really interesting urban fabric that sort of collided or created a geometry of interaction on the site. There was a heritage market space, and all of that combined with these ideas of the temperature with large seasonal fluctuation and the high levels of solar radiation pushed us to propose a building that was really pulled apart so that you could have both the building and the sustainability strategies visible on the facade. And then this, as part of this mobilizing vision, really created this idea of social sustainability, so that our approach was not just about being a net zero building, but also having that net zero be integral to the overall design approach and aspirations of the building. So at the time we had winter gardens, which preheated the air. We had a south-facing building where we were maximizing the heat gain, as well as reusing the existing basement structure to hold water as seasonal storage. And this was one of the boards that we submitted as part of the competition entry. And what you'll see as Tommaso and I walk through some of this development is that because of this early involvement in defining the vision for the project, this image never really changed. Pieces got moved around and reshuffled, but the initial ideas to date still remain as part of what the team is working on.
Yeah, and this was our faces at the very beginning of the competition when we have ideas and we are super excited. And if we move to the next one, this goes also to what Scott was discussing about, how do we communicate in between the team. And I could go on for hours talking about the climate, but at the end of the day, Rachel said, whatever is important for the design. So this is a chart which says Winnipeg has a lot of solar radiation, especially to the southern facades. And then if we move to the next, this was exactly the wow moment when we said, haha, then we need winter gardens. Now, saying we need winter gardens to collect sun has a big design implication. If you don't do it in competition phase where you create the space and the volume for the winter garden, then it's very complicated to introduce it back into the project. So that was the first idea we had. We need to collect sun in the facade, and we do it with the winter garden. And then if you move to the next slide, we said we have an existing underground space which is unused. We can basically reuse it and store the energy, this time from summer to winter with the water storage, because Winnipeg is very cold. Again, in winter, we have lots of sun, especially in summer. So we want to transition this energy with the seasonal water storage from one side to another. And we want to reuse the space because then it's going to be cost effective. So that was, again, the hypothesis, which had a big design impact since the beginning. And if we move to the next, then the project starts and our faces change a bit because that's the way it is, right? Then we start putting together the numbers and we start developing the narrative, talking with the client, because the most critical piece of competition is that you don't really talk with the client. So you have an RFP, you have a vision, you follow it, but you don't have the conversation with the client that then changes again the project the moment you start. And this is the moment of the development of the project.
And I think that's one of the key elements which is a challenge, is that even though the architects and the building performance specialists on this project were working together from the very beginning, and in a lot of ways that's made the project very much a success, this notion of not being able to really be involved in questioning the client and asking questions and having them push back or advise on kind of where they're going did lead to definitely some changes before we were even awarded the competition moving forwards. And so basically within days of our bright idea and lots of excitement, we went from the idea of these sliding volumes that pull apart with our large winter gardens to a building that responded to their need for something to be much more conventional and saving on square footage. We did manage to maintain the idea of the winter gardens, as Tommaso said, a real reason or really a benefit of early involvement is making sure that even if these items get reduced, they still stay a critical role in the project. And so as we moved forwards, we were able to stick with this same idea of the demonstration project and social sustainability by reshuffling some of the ingredients, as Scott said earlier. Unfortunately, this did mean reducing to a more consolidated footprint. And eventually through the first stage of cost estimation, where the client brought on board a construction manager, that meant that what had been 3-story but smaller winter gardens moved into being community spaces or units within the building. And so I think that was really the main hurdle number one, is this notion of, in a project that is still set up with a very traditional structure, but has very high aspirations, how do you challenge the notion of traditional standards like Class D estimate square foot costing when you have really innovative technologies or approaches? So how do you balance that cost versus quality equation, and how do you challenge people's imagination? So the idea of this 3-story space, which to a contractor can look like it's a waste of space and they don't really understand, how can you still try to maintain some of that initial design intent, moving that forwards?
Yeah, and now you understand why I used that emoticon, which was a bit like troubled, because the moment you change the idea of the winter garden, for many reasons, the ventilation concept of the entire building was relying on it, right? So we collect the sun from the facade into the winter garden, then we draw air from the winter garden into the apartments. The moment the winter garden are gone, we have to rethink everything. But the beauty of being there since the beginning is that we kept the same concept. We still use the facade as solar collection. We reverse the ventilation concept. So as you can see here, the air enters from the facade and then it goes through the apartment. And then we have a central chimney which sucks the air out. So we reverse everything, keeping the same concept. And then the other challenge was the water storage, right? The water storage, we kept it in, even if we built it on site now, because for the city didn't really allow to reuse the underground space of before. So we had to build in a water storage. And if you move to the next, to make it cost effective, we found a technology which is basically a prefabricated stainless steel tank, which we dug into the ground. So that was the water storage, which was collecting the solar energy capture from the roof. So even there we found a challenge, which was the market. At the beginning, we wanted to have solar thermal panels on the facade, which the market was not ready for. Then we replaced the facade with PV panel to produce electricity, and the market was ready. And we shifted, if you move to the next and the next, to the solar thermal panels, which are on the roof, collecting solar energy, bringing into the water storage, and then this heat was transferred again to the facade, where operable windows were doing natural ventilation, preheated, because we had a heating element to the facade. And so, long story short, even if the project changed, since on one hand, the team was aware of the logic since the competition, and on the other hand, the client also was following the process, was very able to reshuffle around the pieces and keep the vision there. If we move to the next. So this was also a very strategic move to go with this system, which is a kind of fan coil without a fan. We call it gravity wall, which is in the facade. The air goes through this cavity, gets preheated, and then is supplied into the apartment. And again, the point of why I'm mentioning it is because this requires an integrated design process, because all the pieces, they start being connected one another. And then if we move to the next. Yeah, and then this was another piece of the design, which was very important. We translated in a very simple way. I hope, maybe Rachel, you can confirm if it was simple or not, but if you keep scrolling in this slide, then you see that there are some pieces at the end of our calculations, which were months-long calculation. We translate into, square meter of openings, square meter of transfer elements, square meter of plenum, and square meter of chimneys. 4 numbers, which are a result of simulation of 2-3 months. But at the end, this is what the architect needs. And this is what we delivered to make it actually happen. And also the mechanical engineer, of course, because the mechanical engineer needs to integrate everything one another. And then the last big piece in the next slide of integrated design was, of course, the facade. We wanted to go with fixed exterior shading. We had a southern facade, which was very easy to control with fixed shading. But of course, we had to give some rule of thumbs, which you see on the left. So, this is the wing walls that you need. This is the distance in between the wing wall. This is the depth of the overhang. Those are the artifacts. Then you need to transform it into design. And then we ended up to this very beautiful integrated design of the facade with performance, which is what we actually want.
And I think, as Tommaso just explained in more detail, what we feel remains successful to date is that this notion of having an integrated approach to the building, where you can't separate the net zero approach from the building or the building from the net zero approach. approach. And so one of the benefits, at least from our standpoint, is that when elements are brought up to be removed or value engineered, it's actually very hard to separate these pieces. We can reshuffle them, but to actually step back from the net zero approach is a fundamental change to the building itself. And so at least 50% of this building will be affordable rental housing. And you know, that the integrated approach and the narrative of this is something that we found does help us to be able to discuss with the client as the client group evolves, so that they understand the logic and the narrative of what's trying to be achieved. In moving through that integrated approach, as Tommaso said, there have been different iterations where we had solar thermal on the facade, but then that created kind of issues of not being available within the market. We have run into issues with needing to have the opening area in the windows while still remaining safe for small children living in the building. But that despite all of those hurdles, we are sticking still with the overarching vision for the project. And then one of the key elements is really how together, I think architects and building performance specialists can find ways to convince clients and end users of the value of what we're trying to do and how we need to try to change the way we look at buildings and look at our environments. And so even just this afternoon, we had a whole discussion about what's too warm, what does temperature actually mean, how is human comfort a part of the experience of the building. And so luckily in Winnipeg, there is a college which is just across the street from the site that actually has a large building efficiency lab that we're in discussions with to do one-to-one mock-ups of the gravity wall and trickle vent and the different elements of the facade, so that we can actually work with them and their students there to test the possibilities, to ensure that we're refining the design as we move forwards, and hopefully convince some of the skeptics that this is actually a building that will be comfortable with natural ventilation when it's 90 degrees outside. And so to date, after all this time, we still remain with really what is the kind of initial diagram of the building. As Tommaso said, essentially we reversed the arrows, but have maintained a lot of the initial elements that were there, thanks to the early involvement and really integrated approach to developing the design of the building. So I don't know, Tommaso, on our to be continued, the saga of our project goes on.
It's going to be a success. I mean, as every project, there are loops with the clients, with the design team, and I think this is normal. The integrated design is not linear; it's a spiral process which goes up and down, and then even the risk mitigation you said. I mean, I have been asked many times to do innovation without risk, and this is a contradiction in terms. I mean, innovation has risks. The point is that you need to mitigate risks in a way that you can be innovative and then make it happen in a cost-effective way, and again, bring innovation into the building industry. So that is what is going to happen in the next year, probably, Rachel, again.
It will, it will.
Thank you so much, Tommaso and Rachel, for that presentation.